So welcome, everyone. We're going to talk a little bit about understanding and prioritizing school needs, part 2 today. And last week, we talked a lot about the process of identifying the work that you need to do to identify some of your priorities, right? And I spoke about different data collection and using a needs assessment document that I shared on the slides, which are on these slides as well. It's a continuation, and student and teacher and community perception surveys, and sort of the kinds of resources that you look at to begin to understand what your school needs. And through that process, you're probably able to articulate some low-lying fruit, right? And some higher-lying fruit. And from that, we recommend identifying sort of 3 priorities that you're going to work on. And that's where we stopped at our last session. And those slides, again, are earlier in this slide deck, so that when we post those slides or when you send the slides, you'll know that you have the beginning session 1 slides as well. So today, we are going, before I start, I do want to thank the charter team at the New Hampshire Department of Ed. They're kind of fabulous, and they're doing a great job trying to help schools using some of the funds that they've gotten from the federal government. So thank you to them. And certainly you can put your hand up if you want to talk, but you can also just talk. And all of the resources from this session will be posted on our DS YouTube channel and shared to everybody who registered within a couple of days of this session. And there's highly likely going to be a brief survey at the end. So go ahead. I'm Karen. Since I'm here in front of you, I thought it would be cute if I put a little baby picture in there. But I am the PD director at Demonstrated Success and co-founder, and however many years ago it is now, 8 years. I've been doing this for a while. I've had a lot of fun roles. My initial area of interest was special education and literacy. I served as a literacy specialist for a district and an RTI coordinator, MTSS, curriculum assessment. I love culture and climate. I love a lot of things. I also love swimming, biking, and doing African dance poorly. And I've been learning how to play the piano. So Susan's here today with us. And Susan, do you want to tell us about your school a little bit and your role there?
So I am the business manager at the Arts Academy of New Hampshire. We're a integrated arts high school, grades 9 through 12.
Okay, great. And you're here, I assume, because you came to the last one and you really liked it.
I did.
Good. I'm so pleased. And I hope that you can make use of all the resources. And my understanding is that you have. So that's
Yeah.
terrific, some of them. Okay, so today we're going to talk about planning effectively to achieve the goals that you set, right? We talked last week about establishing priorities and articulating some goals. And now we're going to talk about how do we work to achieve them. So the first thing I just wanted to talk through was a little bit about root causes and a couple of protocols that you can use to identify root cause. And then we're also going to consider some strategies to encourage accountability when you create an improvement plan. So root cause analysis, they make it into such a big thing. Root cause analysis. I always felt when I started doing this work, I felt like, wow, it must be something very mysterious, but it's really not very mysterious. You are just simply discovering the causes of the problems that you've identified so that you can line up appropriate solutions, right? If we have a problem and we don't uncover the correct root causes, and then that causes us to put a lot of energy and activity into a solution that is not directly related to the root cause, then we've wasted potentially time, money, all these things and teacher efforts, right? And so you don't want to do that, especially when kids are at stake. So you always want to sort of hone it down to the most basic reason, keep it within the school's control. You want to find evidence to support that root cause. So you want to use data. And you want to keep it focused on what the adults and the leaders and the teachers can do, right, to mitigate the problem. Now, it's I always feel like they brand root cause like it's an exact science, right? And it's actually can't be an exact science, right? You do the best you can. So I remember feeling intimidated when I first started doing this work, like, wow, what if I don't have the correct root cause? But you do the very best you can and you do it with fidelity. And then that's why we have plan, do, study, act cycles. Like, so if you came around to a root cause and you have some interventions that you've planned, and that's why you then turn around and see if the interventions worked. And if they didn't, you stop. Okay. So this is just some, you can have a fundamental root cause, which is your deepest cause. And then you can have some immediate causes, which is maybe a more superficial cause, the direct, like the antecedent cause. So there's different levels of root causes, and I wanted to just make that clear. And I put the 5 whys up there because I'm going to show you a 5 whys protocol. And that can also precede another more complex protocol, which may help you to have better luck coming up with the accurate root causes. So for root cause analysis, let's talk about it in terms of kids. So if we have performance concerns, I'm going to talk to you about a fishbone chart, right? But you're going to always start by brainstorming possible causes. You're going to categorize possible causes together. You're going to narrow those to things that are actionable. Take out anything that's outside of the school's control. Use this 5 whys chart or protocol to sort of really dig in deep there by keeping repetitively asking why. And I have some models. And then you're going to verify, just like I said earlier, with multiple data sources. And then you're going to align them with whatever the performance concerns are. So this is an example, and I'm sure that you've seen this, the 5 whys protocol. You have a problem at the top and you keep asking why. Why? Why? It's actually kind of fun. It's also sort of liberating. If you're in a group, it's really very liberating. So this is a model for you. I identified a problem. Our students are performing well in math on curriculum-based assessments, but their scores on SAS are poor. Okay, why? Well, they're not transferring their learning to the state test. Why? Well, the items on the SAS are different than the items that they're working on daily in their curriculum. Well, upon closer analysis, the SAS has fewer visuals and models and more language. Well, why is that? The SAS is assessing math skills and students' ability to leverage math practices and apply their skills in novel situations. Okay. So what I came down to in this internal dialogue that I made for the slide is our students have trouble independently applying math practices and transferring the learning skills, right? So so that now lets you think about, okay, what can we do to help them? Your solutions are now focused on independence, integrating math practices, and transfer daily, right? So you may consider some solutions like, taking out the scaffolds periodically for kids, using SAS items, integrating those New Hampshire SAS items throughout your instruction, doing an analysis of same standard items from your curriculum documents to the SAS and taking and holding those items side by side and looking at the differences in language, in models, and multi-step, all that sort of thing. Okay, so there was one example. And I have another example on the next page. Problem two, the office is overwhelmed with behavior issues. Why? Well, teachers are sending down many disruptive students. Why? Teachers are feeling overwhelmed. Why? There are an untenable number of behaviors in class. Why? Students are dysregulated after the pandemic. And why? Because they missed social learning in that time. Okay. So in our why sequence, we went from, well, the problem is all these behavior issues. And we have successfully narrowed it down to say our kids they've missed social learning, right? So the solution is then to provide the kids with that social learning, right? So the root cause is our students need increased SEL supports throughout their days to compensate for lack of skills, right? So this is just a little demo of this 5 whys for you. Now, when you're done doing that, and the thing I like about the 5 whys is that it's a really good warm-up for this more complicated root cause diagram. So this is called a fishbone diagram. And it's a graphic that's used to examine possible causes, right, and effects of a problem that are going to feed your action planning when you're trying to solve the problems. Something I want you to know here, that this is a live link. And this is a nice, completely blank fishbone for you. Okay, so you can just download that. It's a wonderful tool. It's work intensive, but I feel like if you successfully, let's say you're done doing your needs assessment, you've filled out the documentation I shared with you last time for highlighting some of your needs in terms of culture, achievement, classroom instructional practice for tier 1, and you've looked at data, you have a perception survey, you've identified 3 areas, right, that are problems of practice. If you put one of those areas and the statement, right, where it says problems of practice over there, and then you start to backfill the fishbone, by the time you're doing your strategic planning, you have a lot of information. So I want to just emphasize that. It's a great tool. And I'm actually have to thank the Vermont Department of Ed because they had some nice information for me to share. That this slide in particular, they recommended that you consider working through these categories, right? So thinking about your resources, the skills. So it's like pedagogy, what do teachers know, what teachers don't know, what are the leadership skills in the building, the knowledge, so issues around content knowledge or systems or communication, right? Data, right? All of that sort of formative, summative, all data collection, the environment, health, socioeconomic, school culture and climate, and processes, policies, right? Because sometimes it's your school policies that may be getting in the way. So those are some different categories to consider when you're thinking about the fishbone. And these are the directions right here. So like I said, you're going to write the problem of practice, and then you're going to think about the categories. You're going to label those categories. And I have a slide right after this to show you in the blue boxes. And then you're going to brainstorm and collect causes for each category that you chose. And you're going to list them on each fishbone. And if a cause has a secondary cause, you can draw a branch to show the relationship among the causes. And then you're going to keep using your whys, right? Why, until you've kind of drilled down enough to have something that you can actually test. So I'm going to show you this, right? So let's look at this. Here's an example. On the right-hand side, our problem is that not all the teachers in the building are applying consistent, high-quality instructional practices from math. And we see in this particular fishbone that their categories were knowledge, skills, resources, measures, environment, and process. So those were their categories. And now we have some causes, right? So let's just look at the knowledge category, and that's the upper left. Potentially, right? There could be lack of content knowledge. So maybe the teachers don't actually have the content knowledge that they need. Maybe the next box down, maybe the teachers don't all agree on what best practice is, right? So what they've basically done is they thought, I'm going to do my own thing and I'm going to shut the door. And then the third category there is in potentially ineffective pre-service training. Now, we don't necessarily have control over pre-service training, right? So I would put an X through that. If we go down to the bottom, for processes, if we just look vertically down and we move down, for processes, need for collaboration, sharing best practices, common language, unified across grades. Okay. So maybe they don't have a process for that. Maybe that's not in the schedule. And even if it was, maybe they don't know how to manage that time. Initiative fatigue. Okay. Maybe there's a billion things going on. Administrative turnover. So lack of consistency and clear direction, right? So you kind of get the drift. I'm not going to talk through the whole thing, but it's a really wonderful way to set up your discussion around causes. And once you have this mapped out, it's not a static document. You may do a brainstorm fishbone and then it turns into something else. Well, you start another one because all of a sudden we can get rid of ineffective pre-service training because that's not necessarily something that's in our control. And other people in a group may have different things to say about, and the more you talk, I think the more likely you are to get to causes that are realistic and targeted and relevant for your particular setting if you do this in a group. Any questions or comments? Good? Okay. Whoa, that was interesting. What's happening? All right. So this is just another example. The problem here was that the LEP program decreased, proficiency decreased. Okay. And the way they set this up is different. They set up their categories with adult-based reasons, right? Or causes, student-based reasons or causes, things that are in our control and things that are out of our control, right? So this is sort of like a mini fishbone. And you can see here that, for instance, in our control, adopted series isn't aligned to standards. Well, we need a new series, right? They crossed out the things that were out of their control. And I'm just going to pick something from the bottom where it says student-based. So then that's lack of motivation, right? The solution to that is teacher-focused, right? That focuses on engagement. So anyway, this is just the fishbone's a great way to structure your conversations about causation. All right. Questions, discussion. Good. We're going to talk about accountability a little bit. And I'm going to talk for a moment just about self-accountability, team accountability, and fidelity to plan. I'm going to talk about all of those things. So self-accountability are the tricks that we conduct with ourselves when we know we need to make ourselves accountable, right? So you might set alarms. I always set alarms when I go out and I socialize. I have to be home at a different time, right? I set an alarm for myself. That's a piece of self-accountability. Or I oftentimes at work, I will ask someone to hold me accountable with intentionality, or I'll set up a meeting so I know I'm accountable to get something done, that kind of thing. Team accountability has to do with communication, and then fidelity to plan. We'll talk about that too. So these are 12 accountability strategies that our group really believes in. Um, documentation. And I want to speak to this for a minute because I was at a session yesterday and teachers were saying, we do this work, we have great conversations, we don't have time. Like oftentimes we're having conversations in the hallway, we're having conversations at lunch. The thing about, and all those conversations are wonderful and necessary. I think it's important to set aside time to document your conversations and your planning for a lot of reasons. Um, First of all, it certainly helps with follow through. Second of all, if something doesn't happen, you know why. Third of all, the same problem might occur next year. Like if you're at the end of a unit and you realize your kids don't know something in the unit and you have a fly-by-night conversation in the lunchroom about what the problem was and what you're going to do, and you never document that, you have to have that same conversation fly-by-night the following year. And it's like you're starting from the beginning over and over and over again. So if you document and you track it, it gives you a greater sense of efficacy and it saves time. Um, Always measurable goals, right? Always, 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 or evidence. How are we going to know we did that? How are we going to know we were successful? Because you know what? If 60% of our kids scored a level 3 on the writing rubric from our last unit assessment, that means we want 80% of our kids the next time, and we're actually going to look. And you know what? Then we get to celebrate. Then you don't have to end the year not sure whether you made progress. You know, that feeling that kicks in around May? You're like, man, the year is ending. I don't know what I accomplished. But you don't want that. And if you set measurable goals and if you celebrate them, then you feel like you did something and you have a greater sense of efficacy. Making everybody responsible for team agendas. I think that's really important. At the end of your previous meetings, set up the agenda, take 5 minutes. What are we doing next time? Everybody give input. Always make individuals accountable to tasks when you're making action plans. Set dates. And you know what? The world's not going to explode if the date isn't met, but it forces that person or that team to be aware of the time passing, to send out an email and say, listen, team, I can't do it by then. Here's when I think I can't do it, right? Or we can't do it, and let's reschedule it. Follow up, follow through. Again, accountability partners. If you feel like you're a person who's super busy and sometimes things fly off your plate and you forget, have an accountability partner. Make mistakes, establish a culture where it's like, okay, you blew it. Oh, well, we all blow it. What are the consequences and what are we going to do about it? Reward wins, celebrate success, lead by example. I like this one, number 11, be public, set public goals and schedule public updates. So 4 times a year, commit to presenting to your whole staff about your change ideas and your progress around change so that it's public for your staff, it's public for your parents, it's public for your board. It holds you accountable to follow through. And always include all your stakeholders. Okay, so those are the 12 ideas. Maybe you have more. That was just 12. If anybody has more, Susan, if you have more, anything I didn't think of, you're good? Okay. This is some documentation I'm sharing with you. So these are SMART goals. So when we talk about measurable goals, we talk about SMART goals. We make them specific, we make them measurable, we make them attainable, results or outcome oriented, and time bound. And that speaks to some of the things, the 12 things on that list. All right. So this is a document. This link here takes you to forms that you can use. So just know that they're there for you. Oh, somehow I linked. We'll just talk about it from here. So another one that I've shared with you is year-long action steps. So when you're creating a SMART goal, let's say your action steps are focused on student performance. So if the current situation is that, according to several years of SAS, only 40% of your kids over the last few years on average have been proficient in math, then your year-long SMART goal might articulate, well, by the end of this year, we're going to try to have 65% of our kids proficient at math, right? According to your this year's SAS testing. And you're going to actually itemize strategic steps, who's responsible, the timeline, and what are we using for evidence. So that is one of the documents, another document that I shared with you there. Okay. I'm afraid if I click again, this is set up to go back to that. So, but these are the two documents that are really most important. Okay. Oh, there it is. So this is just a SMART goal worksheet. And that's also included in the folder that link takes you to. Okay. And there's the document I was just talking about. All right, this document is also connected. It's linked there, and it's great for action planning. When you're done with your fishbone, your leverage and barrier section here will be quite rich. You will know all about what you have to leverage because you will have spent an hour or two discussing for that particular priority what some of the clauses are, what, you will already have brainstormed. And so you're going to talk about your barriers, what you have to leverage to solve the problem. And this is just an example. The priority area that this team settled on was math performance. And to leverage, they had some big space that they could use to differentiate. They had common unit assessments that they can look at to make judgments about student learning. They have plenty of time for math instruction. And they also have time for grade level meetings so that teachers can bring classwork, student work, they can talk about learning. Some of the barriers are that teachers may not have the skill set to differentiate. And again, students are struggling with SAS items and that the math curriculum is actually new, right? So we don't know to what fidelity it's being implemented. We don't know how comfortable teachers are. So there's some action steps right there that lends us to. This is just showing you how to fill out the bottom portion. So if your change area or your goal is to improve math scores by a certain percent or a certain percentage of students will grow, this is just an example, right? So create classroom this one action step was create classroom observation criteria, which we do all the time. To gain perspective on how teachers are and are not differentiating and using UDL framework to remove access barriers to meet students' needs. So just to explain this, I'm sure many schools do this, but you create a observation look for sheet of what you want to see in terms of what appropriate and skilled differentiation and UDL, universal design for learning, application looks like. And then you conduct a series of walkthroughs to gather information about how your teachers are doing with that. And they're non-evaluative. And you have to have a big talk with your staff and say, listen, we're collecting information for professional development. And then you aggregate that information, and then you're able to come to conclusions about what your staff needs to learn, and you turn that into an action step. Okay, so that was just one example. Okay, any questions or comments around that? We are done with my personal delivery of this. I wanted to point out that there's some other events happening. So next Thursday, USAFE is not a session that has to do with charter schools from New Hampshire, but it's something that our organization is just sharing with charter schools, specifically 9 through 12. And I think I spoke about it last time. So feel free to tune into that. But the next three are important and they are sponsored by the New Hampshire Department of Ed. So that's, on the 4th and the 11th of March, the moving from fighting fires to a plan of approach, and then integrated strategies for SEL, set the 7th and the 14th of March, and then cultivating student agency. They will all be recorded. But again, these sessions ideally are interactive. They've been set up to be interactive. So we'll adjust a little bit to that and make it a little bit more presentation mode. but it would be wonderful to have you all there. They're at 3:30. And maybe next time we do this round, we will try to maybe do it later in the evening, or we'll experiment. That's my contact information. And last, I did want to, well, some of the information that I got today was from the Vermont AOE, and then I wanted to show you that the Clark County School District document that's linked there was a nice school improvement planning document that I was looking at before we came on today. All right, so that's it for this.